Steelers Nation, we are less than 1 week away from the NFL draft, and we still have an answer at quarterback. So I got none other than Lauren WKR with us today to discuss what the Steelers should do at quarterback, the elephant in the room that is Aaron Rodgers, and a bunch of other things to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's get into it. The lady, she's no myth, the legend, Lauren WKR is definitely back in the building today to grace us with her presence to give Steelers Nation a rundown of what we're doing in 6 days. Let's just put it plain. And we don't understand exactly why we waited this long, but I'm hopeful that she has some answers for us because I'm puzzled and befuddled. But my lady, madam, thank you for gracing us with your presence again today. And first of all, how are you feeling? Oh, okay, my bad. I got you muted there. Oh. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just saying that I'm going to do my best to try and I'm going to do my best to try and put everything into perspective in terms of what's going on with my Steelers. But overall, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling very, very blessed. And, if you would have asked me that question as it pertains to the Steelers maybe 2 months ago, I probably would have been somewhere pulling my hair out. And complete frustration and just saying WTF upon WTF upon WTF. But you know what? I'm calm, I'm cool, collected, and I'm trying hard to stay calm, cool, and collected. But you know what? The draft is a week away, and you know what? I have some thoughts as to what they should do, whether or not they actually do it. We'll see. But overall, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Thank you once again for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to come and talk Steeler football and provide any insight that I have or opinion or whatever, right? Whatever. I'm always down to talk Steeler football. So thank you for having me again.
Awesome. Yes, we definitely want to talk about what is going on. And this is the finale to our NFL Insider series. We're going to wrap it up with the Steelers. We did every team on the list. If you watch this on YouTube, the Niners, the Chiefs, the Commanders, as well as the Chargers. Now we have the Steelers insider here, the very own Lauren Whitaker with us today. So we're going to talk about, first and foremost, what this team did in the offseason. So we're going to get there, and then we're going to broach the topic of what they're going to do going forward. So as we are moving on in haste, so we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers here, the 2025 offseason review. So for starters, let's quickly go over what they did in the offseason, I guess you can say. Made some moves here. I mean, the biggest splashes, or some noteworthy names here. There's, typical Steelers fashion outside of making the big splash with DK Metcalf. But, outside of that, on this list, what were you really impressed with on what they did in the offseason?
In terms of what I can't help but bring up DK simply because, and we've talked about it in previous shows, that wide receiver was one of the biggest needs that the Steelers needed, just based on how everything played out last season. And the fact that we were able to get DK, I was excited about that. There were some thoughts that came along with that in terms of who our quarterback was potentially going to be. Obviously, that did not come to fruition. And when I say that, I'm referring to Russell Wilson. Wow. I assume that by virtue of us signing DK that, obviously, obviously they didn't have, Russell Wilson entirely in mind, but that was just where my head went. Like, okay, well, they've got that rapport from their, relationship in Seattle, and maybe they're also sending a message as well that they are moving forward with Russ, that they are okay with, Justin Fields truly seeing what his worth is out on the market. Mm-hmm. And, obviously Russ wouldn't have been a long-term deal, but that's just sort of where my thinking went. And as we can see, that totally did not happen. And we'll obviously talk about quarterbacks later on. But I think the one thing, I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite here, but I think the one thing that stands out is, DK is the only guy that they signed to a fairly long-term deal, right? They signed him for 5 years. They
Mm-hmm.
signed Darius for 1 year, gave him $10 million. They signed, Malik Harrison for 2 years. They brought Mason back for 2 years, and the list goes on. So these aren't necessarily like long-term deals. So I think it's more so kind of like, I think it's a mixture of trial and error. I think it's a mixture of, well, let's, see if they still got some gas left in the tank and can contribute that to the team. I think it's a little bit of everything. And I also think too that it's to bring competition, right? Bring competition to each of those specific positions, and see who ends up making the cut. If I'm looking at Mason Rudolph, I think that was something that had to be done as we saw. We had to bring in a quarterback because Justin ended up taking a 2-year deal with the Jets. Obviously, there were some conversations that happened with Russ that made him want to explore other options. I think immediately after the news came out that the Steelers had interest in Aaron Rodgers, the news following that was Russ going to, Cleveland and visiting with the Browns. And then that led to him visiting with the Giants and then him ultimately signing with the Giants. So I personally think that Rudolph was brought in more of like a security blanket. And it's interesting too. They say don't burn bridges. And I would like to think that the bridge wasn't burned, considering that relationship still exists. I mean, he's coming back to Pittsburgh, right? And
Right.
Is Mason Rudolph going to be quarterback number 1? Do I see him as a number 1 quarterback? No. But at the same time, I know people are indifferent on the word game manager, but he knows the system. He knows the Steelers. And, a lot of people forget that the year that we had both him and Mitch Trubisky, he was outperforming Mitch. But for some reason, we went with Mitch that year. And there was a lot of expectations put on Mitch. And, obviously the story. And I bought into the Mitch Trubisky. I was like, okay, it didn't work out in Chicago. When he first got drafted in Chicago, he did show signs of being a good quarterback. So maybe he just wasn't in the right system kind of deal. And maybe, I think after he left Chicago, he was under Josh Allen for a season or two. I'm not entirely sure, like his entire tenure while he was in Buffalo, but we brought him from Buffalo over to Pittsburgh. And so I was like, okay, this is his time to shine. This is his time to, kind of show everyone the quarterback that he can be. And obviously that did not work out.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know that I necessarily, I really, like I said, I really feel like it's a mixture of a lot of things. We've got security blankets, we've got competition, and we've got, hey, we want what's left of you, for the 2025 season.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is typical Steelers ideology here. You lose Dante Jackson, you bring in Darius Slay.
Right.
I like that idea. You have two budding superstars at linebacker, but you bring in Malik Harrison to add to the depth to that room. A veteran leader in that space. Need a backup quarterback, obviously Mason Rudolph. I like the Kenneth Gainwell signing, honestly, by losing Najee. It's funny because it's like a going back and forth story with the Steelers and the Chargers. Rumors that Cam would swayed him from the Chargers to come to y'all. That was one thing. You lost Dante Jackson to us. You got our old tight end Donald Parham, and things of that nature. So it's like we're going back and forth with trading players, back and forth, kind of thing. So so I see the vision here in the sense where you bring in veterans and you're going to basically surround the rookies that you're bringing in and going to develop around the veteran leaders that you have, so they don't feel the pressure of having to go out there and perform early, and they could just kind of be themselves, mature at a right pace, and be able to be put out there when it's time. So that's typical what the Steelers like to do from my perspective and my purview. But I do believe that they did what they did when it comes down to the signings work. But again, but the elephant in the room, the most glaring need is quarterback, because I see till I'm blue in the face that if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything in this league these days. And stay tuned for part 2 of our Steelers series, where we discuss if Aaron Rodgers is a good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers of 2025. And as always, remember, subscribe to never miss an upload.